So one more place I have to ask you about, Ascension Island. You mentioned this earlier. You described this as both the most lovely and the most strange of all the forgotten corners of Empire. So what was lovely about it and what was strange?
Well, initially, it doesn't appear ugly because it is, as someone described it, hell with the fire put out. It was just a volcano with no vegetation on it at all. But then, I think the latter part of the 19th century, maybe the 20th century, someone decided that you could actually attract vegetation by, well, what you need is rain. There was effectively no rain because the warm, wet westerly winds would sail right over it without being caught by anything and proceed on their merry way to Africa. So they planted some trees at the very top that brought in some soil from England, I think. And this resulted in the moisture being caught, and rain started to fall on this summit. And eventually it built up into a little rainforest, which sort of spread down the flanks of the mountains, sufficiently for there to be grass and ultimately cattle. So someone bought some cows there. And I remember the place was run in those days effectively by the BBC. And the BBC gives initials to every person who works there. Their job is, for instance, anchor. I remember it, editor news and current affairs. So who is anchor? Anchor is Mr. Smith. The man who ran the farm on the summit of Ascension Island that provided milk for the people that were unfortunate enough to live there was named MacDonald, and his initials were EIEIO. He was electrical instrumentation and energy, something
That's
officer.
genius.
So Mr. MacDonald had a farm on Ascension Island. But I stayed there once. I had a bizarre experience. I was heading north from the Antarctic on a little Russian freighter. It was going so slowly. And this was after the Falklands War, when there was a regular flight from Brize Norton in Oxfordshire, RAF, to the Falklands, which touched down to refuel on Ascension Island. And I figured if I pulled a few strings, rather than lumbering northwards on this Russian ship, which passed within a few miles of Ascension, I could persuade him to let me land on Ascension and catch a ride back to England on the RAF. And they said yes. And so I found myself on Ascension, waiting for this plane, which was due to come in 3 or 4 days' time. And the local vicar, there is a vicar who lives in the old leprosy hospital, because it used to be a place for putting lepers. And so I stayed there with him. He was Timothy, I think his name was, and Angela. And they were really sweet and nice. The northbound plane came down from London, and it was going to go on to Port Stanley, and the Falklands, turn around and come back. So it would be about 36 hours more. And the vicar was very pleased. And he said, Simon, this is your last night on the island, so I want to show you something special. So we had dinner with him. And that was the night I was going back at about 3 a.m, I think. And he said, well, we managed to get a little surprise on the southbound plane. We've got some strawberries and cream from England. It's wonderful. So let's go and find the only white sand beach on Ascension. All the beaches are black volcanic sand, but there was, for some peculiar geological reason, there's a white sand beach. And so we went to it. And if you can imagine, the pitch dark, there was no moon. And the sky was deeply velvety black. No, I'm sorry, I've got it wrong. There was a moon. There was a full moon. And so the white sand was brilliantly white. We laid out a tablecloth in this little dark cove. And we had white wine and strawberries and cream from England, courtesy of the southbound aircraft. And it must have been about 10 o'clock at night. And he said, the surprise for you ought to start about now. And sure enough, out of the surf, you could see lumbering figures looking like invading troops coming towards us. And we realized as they passed us, they were turtles, scores and scores of turtles, which had come all the way from Brazil And they ranged themselves behind us, turned round, scooped with their rear flippers holes in the sand, and then laid clutches of eggs. And then, bless their hearts, strolled back into the water without a care for their young ones, and began the long 2,000-mile swim back to Brazil. And I thought that was pretty amazing. Then, as we were sort of chatting about this extraordinary phenomenon, suddenly it started to get really cold. And I couldn't work out why until I saw that the moon was going into a total lunar eclipse. And sure enough, everything went pitch dark. That's what I was remembering about the darkness, the velvety darkness. And I thought, this is pretty amazing. But then there were rising out of the eastern sky the brilliant lights, and they were the lights of the Hale-Bopp comet. If you
Wow.
remember, there was a comet,
Yes.
which was not visible because of the moonlight, but became visible because of this eclipse. And then the shadow of the Earth receded, and the moon started to look like a bright moon again, and the Hale-Bopp comet disappeared. And we were all lying on the beach thinking, my God, what a wonderful sort of confection of delights, when suddenly two more lights appeared in the southern sky. And I thought, that's weird. Is that another comet? And the vicar said, no, that's the lights of your incoming aircraft.
Wow, just in time.
Just in time.